Chosen one, the notification came at 2:47 in the morning. Not a text, not an email, something older than that. A feeling, the kind that crawls up the back of your neck and sits there heavy and warm like a hand that doesn't belong to anyone in the room. Marcus had been asleep for maybe 3 hours when his eyes opened. Not slowly, the way sleep usually releases you. All at once, like a switch. He lay there staring at the ceiling of his apartment, listening to the city outside, doing what cities do at 2:47, breathing in a low, industrial rhythm, taxis somewhere below, a dog that couldn't settle, the hum of a refrigerator that had been running for 6 years and would probably outlive him. He lay there and he felt, with complete and unreasonable certainty, that something was about to happen to him. He was 31 years old, he worked in data analytics for a logistics company. He microwaved his meals 4 nights out of 7 and told himself the other 3 counted as cooking. He had not, by any measure anyone could apply to a human life, been chosen for anything. His mother used to say he was special, but mothers say that. That's the whole job. He sat up, reached for his phone. No notifications. He put it back down. The feeling didn't leave. He got up, went to the kitchen, drank a glass of water, standing over the sink the way his father used to, staring out at the dark back alley where nothing moved. He went back to bed. He did not sleep again until nearly 5, and when he did, he dreamed of a door. Not his door, not any door he recognized, just a door at the end of a long hallway, and behind it light, not the flat white light of a lamp or a screen, something older. Something that pulsed. He forgot the dream by 7 a.m. He showered, he made coffee, he took the subway. 3 weeks later, the letter arrived. Not an email, an actual letter. Cream-colored envelope, no return address, his name written by hand in ink that looked almost brown, the kind of ink that suggested someone had taken their time. He almost threw it away, thinking it was a wedding invitation from someone he'd lost touch with. He opened it standing in the hallway of his building, his coat still on, his bag still over one shoulder. Inside, a single index card. On it, 5 words, handwritten in the same brown ink. Go to your room. That was it. That was the whole letter. He laughed. He actually laughed, out loud, alone in the hallway, because what else do you do? He flipped the card over. Blank. He looked back in the envelope. Nothing. He checked the postmark on the outer envelope, smudged, unreadable. He stood there for a long moment, the card in his hand, the hallway very quiet around him. He went to his room. He didn't think about why. He just went, set his bag down in the kitchen, hung his coat, walked to his bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed and closed the door. And then he waited in the way you wait when you don't know what you're waiting for, which is really just sitting very still and paying attention. Nothing happened. Not that night. But something had shifted. He could feel it in the room. Not a presence, not exactly, more like a quality of the air, a density, the way a room feels after someone has just left it. He sat on the edge of his bed for 40 minutes, and when he finally lay back, he noticed that his breathing had slowed, his chest had unclenched. The low-grade static that lived in his mind, the to-do lists and the background anxieties and the half-finished thoughts, had gone quiet. He hadn't felt this still in years. He thought about the card. Go to your room. It was the kind of thing you said to a child. It was a punishment or it was a refuge, depending entirely on what kind of childhood you had. For Marcus, his room had been the latter, a place he retreated to when the noise of the house got too large, when his parents argued about money in the kitchen, when the world beyond the window felt like something being thrown at him. His room had been a place where he could close the door and be, briefly and completely, just himself. He hadn't thought about that in a long time. He didn't sleep that night either, not really. But for the first time in months, the wakefulness didn't feel like failure. It felt like vigil. He told no one about the letter. He knew how it would sound. He knew because he'd run the conversation in his head with his friend Donna, who was practical and loving, and would immediately start asking if he'd checked whether anyone in his building had a weird sense of humor. He ran it with his brother, who would laugh and then worry and then suggest Marcus needed to get outside more. He ran it with his therapist, who he hadn't seen in 8 months because he'd convinced himself he was fine, and who would undoubtedly find the whole episode clinically interesting in a way that would make Marcus feel like a case study. So he kept it. He kept it the way you keep something that doesn't belong to you but that you don't know how to return. He started going to his room more, deliberately. He'd come home from work, set everything down, go to his room, close the door. Sometimes he'd sit, sometimes he'd lie down, sometimes he'd just stand at the window and watch the light change on the building across the way. He wasn't doing anything. That was the whole point. He was just being in the space, with the door closed, with the outside world temporarily suspended. He noticed things. That was the first effect. He started noticing things he had stopped noticing, the way the room smelled in the evening versus the morning, the sound of the pipes in the walls, the exact quality of silence that fell between one car passing and the next. He noticed that he had a small crack in the ceiling plaster above his bed that was shaped, if you were willing to be generous about it, like the coast of a country he couldn't name. He noticed that the light at 4 p.m. in October came in at an angle that turned the wall above his dresser the color of something almost golden. He started sleeping again. Properly. The second letter arrived on a Tuesday. Same envelope, same ink, same careful handwriting. Inside, another index card. This time 4 words. Close the door. Listen. He was in his room within 10 minutes, door closed. Sitting in the middle of his bed with his legs crossed and his hands in his lap, feeling slightly ridiculous and slightly terrified in equal measure, the way you feel when you're about to do something you can't explain to anyone. He listened. He heard the refrigerator, a bus. Upstairs, someone walking in heavy shoes, slow and deliberate. The pipes, his own heartbeat, eventually, or at least the awareness of it, that interior percussion we spend most of our lives successfully ignoring. And then he heard something else, not with his ears, from somewhere further in. It wasn't a voice. He wanted to be clear about that, even in the privacy of his own accounting of the experience. It wasn't a voice, and it wasn't a vision, and it wasn't anything he could have turned into a headline. It was more like a recognition, like something that had always been on the edge of his awareness, quiet and patient, had finally found him in a room quiet enough to speak. What it said, and he understood this not in language but in something older, something that bypassed the part of his brain that would immediately start arguing, was simply, "You already know." He sat with that for a long time. He started thinking about the choices he had stopped making. That was the thread that kept surfacing in those quiet rooms behind those closed doors. Not the big catastrophic wrong turns. He hadn't had any of those, or at least none he'd recognized at the time, but the smaller capitulations. The job that was fine, but not what he'd imagined at 22. The relationship he'd let dissolve, not from want, but from a kind of fatigue, a failure to fight for what mattered. The book he'd started writing 3 years ago and stopped at 47 pages because someone had made an offhand comment at a dinner party that fiction was a difficult market, and he'd received that comment like a verdict. All these little surrenders accumulated like sediment until the person who had gone to sleep each night was someone he'd made peace with but never quite chosen. He started writing again, not the old book, something new. He didn't tell himself it was a book. He told himself it was just words going into a document, which was a helpful lie that let him keep going. He wrote in the evenings in his room with the door closed. He wrote badly some nights and surprisingly well on others, and he kept going either way because he had stopped waiting for external permission to decide that what he was doing was legitimate. The third letter came in December. He'd almost stopped expecting them, almost. But there it was, cream envelope, brown ink, his name in that careful hand. He took it to his room before he even opened it. He sat on the bed, turned on the lamp, opened it with something close to ceremony. The card said, "You were chosen before you knew what choosing was." He read it 4 times. He set it on the nightstand next to the other 2 cards which he'd been keeping there lined up because they felt like something he should be able to see. He sat in the light from the lamp and thought about what it meant to be chosen, not by another person, not by a system, not by luck or circumstance, but by something in yourself that refuses to stop being true no matter how many layers of ordinary life you stack on top of it. He thought about every person he'd ever met who seemed to have found it, that thing, that alignment between who they were and how they moved through the world. He'd always assumed it was something they'd been given, a kind of grace distributed unevenly that had simply missed him in the queue. He'd never considered that for some of them, maybe most of them, it had been found in exactly this way, in a room, alone, with the door closed, in the middle of an ordinary life, by stopping long enough to hear what had been waiting. He never found out who sent the letters. He looked in the half-hearted way you look when you're not sure you actually want the answer. He asked his building manager. He asked his brother if he'd set something up, which his brother denied with a convincing blankness. He thought about it occasionally, turned it over, and then let it settle. It didn't matter. That was the thing he kept arriving at. Whether it was a person, whether it was some strange fold in the universe, whether it was a part of himself he'd somehow externalized and mailed back to his own address, it didn't matter. What mattered was what had happened when he'd listened. He finished the book the following October. Not the same book he'd stopped at 47 pages. A different one, stranger and more honest, built from the things he'd been turning over in those quiet rooms. He sent it to 3 agents, received 2 rejections, and from the third a response that was not a yes but was not a no, which in that world counted as something close to a door opening. He kept going to his room. He kept closing the door. Not every night. Life doesn't work that way. Life is relentless and loud and full of things that need your attention and won't wait. But enough nights, enough quiet, enough stillness to stay in contact with the thing he'd found in there, the thing that knew, the thing that didn't need noise to exist but did need silence to be heard. Here is what he would tell you if you asked him, which he'd probably prefer you didn't because he was still private about it in the way you're private about things that feel genuinely sacred. The door is the point, not what's behind it, or not only that, the act of closing it, the act of saying, for this hour, for this half hour, for however long I can manage, the world can continue without me. I am stepping out of the current. I am choosing the quiet over the noise, the interior over the exterior, the real question over the comfortable answer. Most people never do this. Most people are afraid of what they'll find in there, or they've convinced themselves there's nothing to find, or they're so thoroughly adapted to distraction that the absence of it feels like a threat. Most people fill every silence before it can speak. It used to be most people. The letter had come at the right moment. Maybe there was always a right moment, and maybe it was always the moment in which you were willing to receive it, which would explain why the same letter sent to 1,000 different people would arrive for exactly one of them. Not because they were different, because they were ready, or because they went to their room anyway, even before they were ready, and closed the door, and sat in the uncertainty until it became something else, until the static cleared and the signal came through and they heard, in whatever language the truest part of them spoke, what they already knew. He kept the 3 cards. He kept them on the nightstand for almost a year and then moved them to a drawer. Not to forget them, but because he no longer needed to see them every day. He'd internalized the instruction. He carried it with him now like a compass that didn't point north, that pointed inward, toward the room, toward the door, toward the silence that had been waiting, patient as stone, for him to finally walk through it. Some nights, he still lay awake at 2:47 a.m. But now, when his eyes opened all at once, he didn't reach for his phone. He lay still. He listened. He let the quiet do what quiet does when you stop fighting it. He let it speak. Watch this alone, you'll understand why. The world we live in has engineered the elimination of silence so completely that most people have never actually experienced it. Not true silence, not the kind that goes deep enough to matter. There is always a screen, always a notification, always a podcast filling the commute, always a television murmuring in the background of a room where nobody is really watching. We have built an entire civilization around the avoidance of quiet, and we have done it so successfully that we mistake the noise for living. We call it being connected, we call it staying informed, we call it productivity. What we rarely call it, because the admission would be too uncomfortable, is fear, because that is what the avoidance of silence really is. Fear, not of the quiet itself, but of what the quiet contains. Because silence, real silence, does not stay empty for long. It fills with the things you have been too busy to hear, the questions you have been postponing, the grief you haven't processed, the dream you quietly buried under the weight of what was practical, the version of yourself you agreed to set aside until later, and later never came. This is why going to your room and closing the door is not a small act. It feels small, it looks small from the outside, a person alone in a room doing nothing visible. But what is actually happening in that room, when the door is shut and the noise is cut and the stillness has a chance to deepen, is closer to what every spiritual tradition in human history has pointed toward than almost anything else available to an ordinary person on an ordinary Tuesday evening. The mystics went to deserts. The monks went to monasteries. The prophets went to mountains. The common thread was never the location, it was the removal, the deliberate stepping away from the collective noise in order to access something that the noise was covering. Every tradition, no matter how different in doctrine or practice, agreed on this one thing. You cannot hear what matters most in a crowd. You cannot find the truest version of yourself in the middle of constant stimulation. The portal requires quiet, and quiet requires courage, because choosing silence in a world that pathologizes stillness is a radical act. Marcus, in the script, does not do anything dramatic in his room. He sits, he breathes, he listens, and slowly, incrementally, the sediment of accumulated noise begins to settle and what lies beneath it becomes visible. This is not metaphor, this is neurology. The brain, in a state of genuine quiet, begins to process differently. The default mode network activates. Connections form between things that had no space to connect before. Insight does not arrive in the middle of a meeting or while scrolling. It arrives in the pause, in the gap, in the room with the door closed. But beyond the neuroscience, there is something that science does not fully account for, which is the quality of what arrives in true stillness. People across centuries, across cultures, across wildly different belief systems have described the same experience of going into silence and meeting something there. Not a ghost, not a hallucination, something that feels paradoxically more real than the noise they left behind. Something that knows them better than they know themselves, and speaks in a language that bypasses argument. The room is the portal, the door is the threshold. The silence is not the absence of something, it is the presence of everything that was waiting for you to stop running long enough to receive it. Most people will read this and nod and then go back to their phones. The chosen ones will put the phone down, get up, walk to their room, close the door, and sit in the quiet until it speaks. The story we have been told about chosen ones is very old and very seductive and almost entirely wrong. It arrives early, usually in childhood, carried by the books we read and the films we watch and the myths that cultures hand down like inheritance. The chosen one is always recognizable. There are signs, there is a mark, a prophecy, a moment of dramatic revelation in which the universe singles out one particular person from the crowd and says, "You." It is always someone extraordinary, someone whose greatness was latent, waiting, compressed like a spring, needing only the right moment to release. We absorb this story so deeply and so young that it becomes the unconscious template against which we measure ourselves and find ourselves, quietly and persistently, lacking. Because most of us are not recognizable. Most of us do not have marks or prophecies. Most of us are living lives that, from the outside, would not suggest destiny in any conventional sense. We have jobs that are fine. We have relationships that are complicated. We have ambitions that have been revised downwards so many times that we've stopped revising and simply accepted the current altitude as the one we were always meant to fly at. We look at the template, the hero, the chosen, the marked, and we perform the calculation quickly, almost without thinking, and we arrive at the same answer we always arrive at: not me. This is the lie the script dismantles. Not gently, not with reassuring platitudes about everyone being special in their own way, which is the kind of thing that sounds kind and means almost nothing. It dismantles it by showing you Marcus, specifically, deliberately, uncomfortably ordinary Marcus, and insisting that he is the chosen one the title promised: a data analyst, a microwave dinner, a 47-page abandoned manuscript, a man who let a relationship dissolve, not from conviction but from fatigue. This is your hero. This is the one who was chosen. And the discomfort you feel reading that description and trying to reconcile it with the word chosen is exactly the discomfort the script wants you to feel, because that discomfort is the wall between you and the truth. The truth is that chosenness, real chosenness, has never been about origin. It has always been about response. Every tradition that uses the language of calling, of vocation, of destiny, is not actually describing a trait that some people have and others don't. It is describing a moment, a specific, repeatable, universally available moment in which a person hears something and decides to take it seriously. The hearing is common. Almost everyone hears it at some point, in some form. The 2:47 a.m. wakefulness. The hollow feeling after another day lived on the surface. The dream that keeps returning no matter how many times you schedule it for later. These are not random. These are the signal. What separates the chosen from the unchosen is not that the signal was sent to one and not the other. It is that one of them stopped and listened and the other pressed snooze and went back to the noise. This reframing changes everything, because it moves chosenness from the category of gift into the category of choice. And choices are available to everyone. Gifts are distributed by forces outside your control: luck, birth, circumstance, the arbitrary favor of a universe that doesn't owe you anything. But choices belong to you entirely. Nobody can make them for you and nobody can take them away. If being chosen is a choice, then the question is no longer whether you are the kind of person destiny selects. The question is whether you are the kind of person who shows up. Showing up, in the context of this script, does not mean grand gestures. It does not mean quitting your job or moving to another country or making a declaration in front of witnesses. Marcus shows up by going to his room, by closing the door, By sitting in the silence even when nothing is happening, even when it feels pointless, even when the rational part of his brain is composing a list of more productive things he could be doing with this half hour. He shows up by taking the letters seriously when every reasonable instinct told him to laugh them off. He shows up by starting to write again, not because the conditions were right, they weren't, but because he had reconnected with something in himself that needed to write the way lungs need air. And once you have reconnected with something like that, ignoring it becomes a different kind of choice, a darker one with consequences. The people we eventually recognize as chosen, the ones who made the thing, built the thing, said the true thing, lived the life that looked from the outside like it had been guided by something larger than ordinary decision-making. Almost none of them started from extraordinary circumstances. What they started from was a willingness, a specific, quiet, unglamorous willingness to take seriously what was happening inside them, even when the outside world offered no confirmation that it mattered. They went to their rooms, they closed their doors, they did the work in the absence of applause, in the absence of permission, in the absence of any guarantee that it would lead anywhere worth going. And here is the hardest part of this truth, the part that the comfortable version of the story always leaves out. The choosing is ongoing. It is not a single moment of awakening after which everything is clear and forward motion is guaranteed. It is a daily recommitment to the same willingness, made again and again in the face of doubt and interruption and the perfectly reasonable temptation to stop. The chosen one is not the person who received the call. The chosen one is the person who picks up every time, even when the line is full of static, even when they can barely hear the signal, even when part of them is not sure anyone is on the other end. That person could be anyone. That person could be you. The only question that remains, the only question that has ever remained, is whether you are willing to go to your room, close the door, and find out. There is a moment in almost every human life where something tries to get your attention. It does not announce itself dramatically. It does not arrive with orchestral accompaniment or a beam of light through the clouds. It arrives quietly, sideways, in the margins of an ordinary day, a feeling you cannot name sitting in a meeting that should feel important, a sudden and inexplicable sadness in the middle of something that was supposed to make you happy, a 2:47 a.m. wakefulness that has no logical cause and will not be reasoned away. It arrives and you feel it, and then because you are busy and because the world does not pause for interior weather and because you have learned gradually and thoroughly to distrust the things that cannot be immediately explained, you dismiss it, you label it stress, you label it tiredness. You make an appointment with a doctor who tells you everything looks fine and you agree that yes, everything looks fine, and you go home and turn on the television and the moment passes, but it comes back. That is the thing nobody tells you about these moments. They are not one-time transmissions, they are patient. They are extraordinarily, almost unnervingly patient, in the way that only things rooted in something deeper than urgency can afford to be. They come back in different forms, wearing different clothes, speaking in different registers, but carrying always the same essential message, the same frequency underneath the different signals. And they will keep coming back, for years if necessary, for decades if that is what it takes. Because whatever is sending them does not have a deadline and does not get discouraged and does not interpret your repeated failure to respond as a reason to stop trying. The letters in Marcus's story are this. They are not mysterious communications from an external source, though they wear that costume convincingly enough to keep the plot moving. They are the accumulated signal of a self that had been trying to reach him for years through every available channel and had finally, in desperation or in wisdom, found a format he couldn't immediately rationalize away. A physical letter, cream paper, brown ink, his name in careful handwriting. Something that demanded to be held, that couldn't be swiped away or left unread in a folder, that existed in the physical world and therefore could not be entirely dismissed as a mood or a passing feeling or the product of an overworked nervous system. We all have letters. This is the central and most personal claim of the script, the one that moves it from a story about a fictional man in a fictional apartment into something that sits uncomfortably close to your own life if you let it. We all have the equivalent of cream envelopes arriving with messages we have been avoiding. The forms vary enormously. For some people it is a recurring dream that visits reliably during periods of particular disconnection, always involving the same symbols, the same unresolved geography, the same feeling upon waking of having been somewhere important and been unable to stay. For others, it is a person, not a romantic interest, not a mentor in any formal sense, but someone who appears at intervals in a life and consistently, without trying, holds up a mirror that shows you something you weren't ready to see and walked away from and then thought about for 6 months afterward. For others, it is a book that falls open to the right page at the wrong time. A conversation overheard in a coffee shop that was not meant for you and yet lands with the precision of something addressed directly to your name. A song that catches you completely off guard on an idle afternoon and opens something in your chest that you had spent considerable energy keeping shut. A child asking a question with the casual devastation that only children unencumbered by the social agreement to keep things comfortable can manage. These are all letters. These are all the same transmission in different envelopes, and the return address on every single one of them, if you look closely enough, if you are willing to be honest about what you are seeing, is you. This is the part that is difficult to sit with, because it would be easier in a way if the letters came from outside, if there were genuinely a mysterious benefactor, a cosmic postal service, a force entirely separate from yourself that had taken an interest in your development and was guiding you from a position of superior knowledge. That version of the story is comforting. It distributes the responsibility. It means that if you miss the message, you were failed by the messenger, and if you receive it, you were lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. It makes chosenness something that happens to you rather than something that emerges from you. But the real version is both more demanding and more extraordinary than that. The real version says that there is a part of you, not a supernatural part, not a part that requires any particular theological framework to believe in, simply the deepest and most honest part, the part that existed before the world started telling you who to be and never entirely accepted the final answer. And that part has never stopped knowing what you need. It has never been confused about what matters. It has never lost track of the dream you set aside, or the capacity you stopped developing, or the question you needed to ask but kept deferring. It has been keeping records with perfect fidelity this entire time, and it has been sending you the results of those records in every quiet moment you allowed yourself, in every unguarded hour, in every crack in the armor of your ordinary constructed life. The letters are the record. The letters are the evidence. The letters are the part of you that refused, across all the years and all the noise and all the very convincing reasons, to give up, to stop believing that you were worth reaching. And this realization, when it arrives fully, is not comfortable. It carries with it an accounting. If the letters were always from you, then you received them. And if you received them and set them aside, then you made a choice repeatedly to not respond to yourself, to treat your own deepest signal as less urgent than whatever was on the screen, less important than the opinion of the dinner party, less worthy of attention than the 1,000 external demands that never once asked whether they deserved to be prioritized over the thing trying to speak from inside you. That is a hard thing to look at directly. Most people glance at it and look away. But looking at it, really looking, in a quiet room with the door closed, without the noise to retreat into, is also where something shifts. Because once you understand that the letters are from you, you understand that you have not been waiting for permission from the universe. You have been waiting for permission from yourself, and that permission was always yours to give. It was never contingent on the right circumstances arriving, or the right people believing in you, or the market for fiction improving, or the timing becoming less complicated. It was contingent only on you deciding, in one quiet and private and entirely unglamorous moment, that what you carried inside you was worth taking seriously. Marcus puts the cards on his nightstand. He keeps them where he can see them every day until the day he no longer needs to see them, because by then he has understood that the message was never in the cards. The cards were just the form the message took when it ran out of subtler options. The message itself was always running, always transmitting, from the part of him that knew, that had always known exactly who he was supposed to become, and was simply with the patience of something that had nowhere else to be, waiting for him to come home to it. Your letters are already written. They have been written for years. Some of them you have already received and set aside. Some of them are arriving right now, in the form of whatever feeling this is producing in your chest as you read this, whatever quiet recognition is moving through you that you will be tempted to dismiss the moment you finish and return to the noise. The question is never whether the letters will come. The question is whether, this time, you will go to your room, close the door, sit in the silence, and finally write back.